is Marina from Darkstar Astrology, bringing you the solar eclipse on the 11th of August, and it falls at 18 degrees of Leo Decan 2. Now, the aspect pattern for this one is that it's part of a learning triangle. The fixed star that will be triggered at this eclipse is Merak in Ursa Major, which loves command and domination. But this eclipse also forms that part of the learning triangle which is resolved by the spiritual healing love trine of Jupiter trine Neptune, which I've already covered on the website. There's a special on that. There's a special post dedicated to that, so I'll give you the link. Now, with this eclipse, we have the influence of the constellation of Mother Bear, Ursa Major. This constellation brings formidable command in times of war when life or death situations need to be made quickly. The moon in this equation adds nurturing but also tough love. So those touched by this solar eclipse will have to risk making short-term austerity measures for the sake of long-term prosperity, which is kind of similar to the theme that we had for the lunar eclipse as well. Only with this one, it's more on a collective level rather than personal level. So these are people in the control, in government, making these austerity measures, which won't be popular. Obviously, they never are. When cuts are made in welfare, it's not going to be liked. Now, with Moon Leo 3, it does not sugarcoat for the sake of popularity. And in a sign that seems so ego-driven, the maternal energy of the bear is actually more about helping others than themselves, which is kind of interesting because, obviously this is Leo, but this is the bear in Leo, the sidereal constellation. How you handle this eclipse really depends on how evolved your own soul is, for otherwise it can trigger a ruthless drive with tyrannical tendencies. At this time, we might have to face traits caused by a difficult childhood, one where we had to fight to be ourselves. Of course, this eclipse could work to toughen the soul up too, and by the end of the 6 months, those touched by it may become more belligerent. Despite all though, however, if the decisions that are taken at this time rub people up the wrong way, those decision makers are still admired for their courageous choices. So for the head of a nation, company, or a family, this eclipse enables trailblazers to do whatever it takes to protect those little cubs in their care. And at the mundane level, this translates as the great patriot, willing to die for their country. And loyalty is also the number one demand at this time. So woe betide any traitors. Those who stoop to revenge at this time will suffer greatly, but they won't care who else they bring down with them. So do keep a wide berth from any great sinking bears around you. So the general meaning of the solar eclipse, as I said before, it's a supercharged new moon, perfect for planting new seeds, starting afresh. We are working on a blank canvas here because it's a dark moon where our ideas can gestate in the soil deep down in the darkness and in the underworld. But with an eclipse, the moon, then it comes between the sun and the earth, and therefore the lunar energies interrupt the flow of energy and cause disruption. So it breaks habitual behavior and gives a kind of cosmic reboot. So the moon will blot out the masculine left brain energy for a while so that the female right brain is flooded with instinctual and intuitive energy. And this makes the unconscious conscious, like when you become aware that you're dreaming. So during an eclipse is a bit like the lucid dream, when we get that sudden feeling of hyper awareness, and when you suddenly realize you're in a dream and go, "Ooh, I can fly." So it's really that kind of feeling with a solar eclipse. So at its best, it can amplify insights gained from a very balanced left and right brain, but it's also really good at showing up any imbalances that you have. So I always like to use this analogy. If you're balancing on one leg in a tree, pose, and the solar eclipse will poke you so that you'll see how balanced you are, and the amount of wobble will show you how much centering you've still got to do, and you might fall to the left or you might fall to the right. So maybe you'll find out which side you're falling to and away from. In order to bring a balance, you need to go back to the one you're falling away from. So that can bring an awakening or a shocking revelation that rocks you to the core, but it's ultimately aiming to balance out your left and right brain so that you're not lopsided. So the tarot card that's associated with this decan is the Six of Wands, and it's about victory, and a great deal of passion is put into focusing on a particular person or goal. Confidence and self-esteem are high and fits very well with Leo Decan 2's general proud demeanour and very, very healthy ego. Karmically, these lions have earned their reward in their life. This is the quote from Teach Me Tarot about the Six of Wands. The answer is yes. Success is yours. You have won. It suggests victory in whatever it is that you're pursuing or fighting for. However, it will only be as a result of the hard work, stamina, tenacity, and strong determination on your part. If you're prepared to put in the effort, then you shall be rewarded well. There is no need to battle anymore, and it's time to start building for the future. So again, it's a bit similar to the lunar eclipse as well, about being rewarded for, sticking it out, really. So generally, it's quite an auspicious decan with no really problematic stars compared to most decans, and this optimism with the double Jupiter rulership of this decan is reflected in the meaning of this card. So that's pretty good. Now, the fixed star that's associated with this solar eclipse is Dubi, which is conjunct the Mercury retrograde that's happening at this solar eclipse. And the other one is Merak, and they are both famous for being the alpha and beta stars in the Great Bear. They're really easily seen in the sky as the front two stars of the Big Dipper or the Plough, and they're contained within the body of the bear. Robson sees Dubi, though, as destructive and says Merak can love command and domination. But the first century astrologer Manilus shows these qualities in a positive light, and I don't believe that their energy is always destructive, especially as this decan is pretty victorious as well. But I think it actually tames those who could be destructive. So of the Great Bear, Manilus says, he will dispel the fury of the tiger, training it to become a peaceful animal, whilst all the other beasts which molest the earth with their savageness, he will join in friendship to himself. So it looks like someone who can tame problem children and civilize those who are usually wild and unruly. Here we find Leo's guiding leadership qualities, since the bears are so close to the celestial pole. Motionless, well, this is Manilus again. He goes on to say, motionless itself, it yet sees everything spinning around it. The top of the axis is occupied by constellations well known to hapless mariners, guiding them over the measureless deep in search for gain. Now, yeah, I did say with the last post that I did that this was going to be a bit of a part 2 in what I wanted to talk about, but it's actually seeming like it's a kind of bit of a part 2 even in the meaning of the solar eclipse itself too, because the guiding hapless mariners, I mean that's Neptunian again, and giving them a path, giving them a course to set themselves, and so they don't get lost in their Neptunian dream. Bernadette Brady also says the constellation Ursa Major gives insight, persistence, endurance, and passive strength. It is the strength of patience and the use of time to calmly solve problems rather than to take dynamic action, which is interesting. So, of course, Neptune, our favourite planet, is in the learning triangle as well. So let's break it down into its little parts. So the first is the solar eclipse conjunct Mercury, and the conjunction does work as a hard aspect, and the moon and Mercury together are quite an odd fit, since the moon can be quite clingy and nostalgic while Mercury is flighty and ever youthful. But what they both share, though, is the tendency to meander through life and change with the tides. The archetype has the feel of the magician about it, so thoughts are things, and at this solar eclipse we could conjure ourselves up a beautiful domestic arrangement if we can focus on our dreams for long enough. A mercurial flavoured solar eclipse gives a great sense of humour, charm and instinctive timing to any project birthed at this time. So the next bit is, well, actually this is what causes the conflict usually, which is moon square Jupiter, which isn't actually too much of a problem really, because Jupiter with moon, even in the square, it's generally a lovely, warm, all-embracing energy that wants to nurture everyone and everything. But this is the danger really, is that with the square you can overdo things. It's an aspect that knows no restraint and can overreact, overreach, and promise the world when it has no idea if it can deliver. Moon square Jupiter is a gambler and risk taker, though 90% of the time luck does swing their way, but when they do fail, they really fail spectacularly. So the resolution is Jupiter trine Neptune, and that's the big aspect of the year. It perfects on August the 19th, and traditionally Jupiter trine Neptune is extremely idealistic and esoteric. It is the archetypical guru, mystic, healer or spiritual teacher. It can herald someone coming into your life who serves as a great teacher or mentor, but there can be a tendency to idolize that person too. This is a supremely glamorous connection, almost fairy tale, and the temptation to go full-on fantasy mode with this trine is really easy, and it will prove very hard to keep your feet on the ground. So now on to the healing meditation. So to make the most of all this fantastical, victorious and jubilant energy at this solar eclipse, make the gods work for you by immersing yourself in this lovely Leo Decan 2 energy. So if your ascendant, sun or moon are in the fixed signs Decan 2, you might find it hard to contain your glee at what you've achieved. So in order to avoid annoying the hell out of your peers and your oversized Leo head taking over the room, try focused meditation and yoga with this Leo theme. So it'll be the Six of Wands to gaze at, a pineapple to eat, because I think that's quite a Leo-looking fruit. It's quite, flamboyant. Sunflower, of course, to adorn your table. Golden beryl crystal to hold. Music in the key of C sharp to listen to. Frankincense, ginger, and orange peel essential oils in a bath. Of course, frankincense, because it's the king of incense. Now, the meaning for beryl. Psychologically, beryl enhances courage, relieves stress, and calms the mind. Mentally, with its ability to filter out distractions and to reduce overstimulation, it encourages a positive view. But golden beryl in particular is a seer stone, aids scrying and magical workings. It teaches initiative and independence and stimulates the will to succeed and the ability to manifest potential into reality. So, yeah, I chose golden, obviously golden Leo. Let's get all that gold out. So, the summary then, the learning triangle at this eclipse is going to, well, basically it shows a huge gamble. When you look at the aspects first, you have the nostalgic and magical eclipse conjunct Mercury. Then the problem arises with the overreaching and impossible promises that are made, since Moon square Jupiter can make such overblown claims. The trine resolution is so much of a fairy tale ending, and the whole lesson seems to be just too good to be true. But maybe that's the point. Maybe someone is going to town with fantasy because the reality is so dire. However, I don't want to put too much of a downer on this solar eclipse, because the tarot card of victory does show hope. So it seems that those touched by this eclipse will need superhuman abilities of willpower to resist the massive temptation that will be put on the silver platter before them, more like a golden platter really. Now maybe it's the case that a fake soulmate will have to be rejected in order to win the real deal. It could also be that some hyperdimensional interference could be attempting to pull apart a truly great union. The path to true love is never easy. Maybe you just need to actually test that potential partner or job offer by withdrawing and playing hard to get. Then you will really know if they are willing to fight for you or whether they are just there because the affair, job, or friendship is convenient. So that ends what I wrote in the post. Now, I think I will carry on with part 2 of what I was talking about before with the lunar eclipse. Although some other thoughts have occurred to me. We'll just see. I'll see what comes into my brain. First, I guess I should explain what I mean by hyperdimensional interference. Now, a while back, I was looking into the whole kind of Archon question, whether there really are alien entities trying to mess up humans on this planet. I still really don't know what my conclusion is about that, because sometimes that hyperdimensional alien label can be used to really avoid talking about psychopaths who are on the planet, that are part of the human race. And it's really hard to know, are they demons that are actual entities, or are they, I think of them, what I think of them now? I think of them as genes in our own body. And, we have latent genes that don't do anything all our lives. And then we have genes that flare up and become, if you've got a tendency towards a certain type of cancer, there are genetic diseases that flare up in some people and not in others. And I think these aliens, whatever they are, this interference can come from that. I'm not sure I don't think I want to believe, I think the alien thing is a way of distracting from very real issues on the planet and in our own DNA, and whether that's being tampered with as well, and whether that explains so much of the mental illness that's going on in the world. Now, then also, I was talking in the lunar eclipse about alcoholism, and what are the causes of that? Is it partly genetic? Are you doomed to be an alcoholic if your father was? And there's a lot of people sort of fixing themselves into that pattern because they've been told, your father's an alcoholic, you'll inherit that as well, this genetic inheritance thing. And there are things that we, on the one hand, people say there's no, the reason that a certain group of people are disadvantaged on the planet, in society, the reason that they are not doing well is not genetic. It's because it's like nurture. It's the fact that they've had a really difficult childhood, or they've been born into poverty, blah, blah, blah. But then others say that it's genetic. So, and then there's a lot of talk about illnesses as being genetic, but then sometimes it's not. So it depends who you talk to. And then there's these cures. You've got a chemical imbalance in your brain. It's genetic. You've got ADHD or you've got Asperger's, so you need to take Ritalin or whatever to correct that. And these people will also say at the same time that there is that it's the environment that counts. So if it's in the environment that makes you ADHD or Asperger's, then you don't need to be taking that Ritalin, do you? So, and the same thing with the alcohol problem. If it's the environment, then you can probably learn to drink moderately. You don't have to just stop drinking it because, you know, you have no boundaries. If you do, you don't seem to have a break, the Saturn break. So it raises all sorts of questions. You know, how much of it is nurture, how much of it is nature? And people seem to move the goalposts depending on what suits them, really. So the people who are attempting to brainwash and farm the human beings on this planet, or the most of, you know, the general populace, the elites, and these elites, you know, they're not aliens, are they? I don't think they're aliens. They're just they are a genetic group, and I think there are set of families, you know, like mafia families. There are sets of families. I'd love to be able to test them all, test all their genes and see how they're related to each other. Because, you know, this is the thing. You look after your own if you're in a family. And they've been taught to do this, and they're very successful because of it. Now, I think what happens to Neptunians generally, and by extension alcoholics, people with drug problems, is that they've been programmed not to have boundaries. They've been programmed to be nice to everyone, and that it's evil to protect your own. And what I've noticed is that these kind of people tend to be lovely to strangers. They can't say no to strangers. If strangers ask them to do them a favor, they'll do everything to help them, and friends. But their own family ends up suffering because they can't say no to other people. So they'll overwork themselves at work. They can't say no to the boss. They can't say no to... So they're basically, you know, they're just put upon so that they come home absolutely exhausted. So when it comes to looking after their family, they just can't do it. They don't have the patience. They'll just tell a crying child to just, you know, shut up. And also what they'll do is, they'll reach for a drink. They'll go, you know, I've worked so hard today. I've given my all to all these different people. And now I just want to be, you know, treat myself. So then they'll start drinking, and then they can't stop because they've been taught to not say no. You know, they've been taught, you know, it's not nice to not say no to people. Why say no to yourself now? So carry on drinking. So I've noticed this with alcoholics. They are Neptunian, of course they are, but it extends into how Western civilization kind of sees itself. And it's kind of interesting that when you look at the Muslim world, they don't, you know, they obviously ban drink. So they have a boundary there, and they have a lot of strict practices where they have to really be organized every day. They have to pray 5 times a day. Then they do their Ramadan where they don't eat. And, you know, they have lots of boundaries that they set themselves, which I think makes them a stronger people. Plus, they're also, of course, they're very dedicated to their family, and you know they've got their community, they've got their spiritual community that they go to all the time. So they're really good at setting boundaries. They're not Neptunian at all, whereas Westerners now, not before, they didn't used to be like this. You know, we used to be very, very territorial. You looked at the whole map of Europe, you know, clearly France was France, clearly Germany was Germany, clearly, you know, all these little areas were very, very distinct with their own cultures, their own food, their own languages. You know, it's not the same as America. And I know I've got a lot of American clients and a lot of American viewers. I guess what you've got the nearest to that is all the different states, and they do seem to have their own kind of identities, really. But that's breaking down now. But yeah, the difference between America and Europe is very. It's a whole big. That topic you could talk about forever. But the thing is, it is very different, and I think maybe what I was going to say actually was about going back to the alcohol thing. Was that obviously when there were tribes there before the Europeans came, so those Native Americans had their own distinct tribes, and the thing was, as they slowly started to lose their territory, and I know that there is an alcohol problem, and the gambling as well. I mean, it's so strange that it turns into from being, with the at one with the earth and its sacred spirituality, and no problems with alcohol, and then the Europeans come and displace them, and although they've got their reservations, it seems like there's still this problem. So, two wrongs don't make a right, and people will say, the Europeans displaced the Native Americans, and now that's happening to the Europeans. But the Europeans are many different ethnic groups. The Southern Europeans are different from Northern Europeans, and I don't want to get into the whole kind of thing. But you can see that alcohol and a loss of spirituality, or alcoholism and the loss of spirituality, seem to go hand in hand. That's why in the AA groups they encourage a spiritual practice, and as a way to get you out of that rut. And if your territory is taken away from you, it's heartbreaking, because we all feel at one with our environment. If you see nature as being sacred, and which the Europeans did, even when Christianity came and took over, it still was. And I've said this before as well. Christianity, it's all the pagan festivals, they're all still embedded in it, and everyone knows this. The church is still a centre point. It's got a community around it. You've got your rituals of marriage and birth and death. It's all those things. So when you remove that, you're left with nothing. You don't have that connection to the sacred land around you, and the cycles of life, and the rituals that you do that reassure you that as day follows night, as spring follows winter, that things will get better, that it's all part of a cycle, that it's not just linear, that it's, it's a circle, the circle of life, all that stuff. So that's reassuring to people. And our minds were in that groove of expecting resurrection. And of course, you've got the ultimate symbol of that with Jesus on the cross. Which is really, like I said, he's a sun god. So I think that gave people hope. And now there's definitely been a deliberate destruction of Christianity to destroy the very last, part of a sacred cycle or community. I mean, that's it. You destroy community, you destroy families, then you've just got these atomized, depressed people who are turning to drugs and alcohol because they've lost their sacred connection to the land. And it's happening, it wasn't right with the Native Americans, and it ain't right with the Native Europeans either. So it's deliberate. It's absolutely deliberate. And the working on people's natural compassion, that Neptunian compassion to want to rescue people, is just cruel. It's absolutely cruel. And they've been taught basically to be nice to strangers, not to say no to strangers, but destroy your family. Well, that's what will happen. That's what will happen. And I've just seen this on a personal level as well. Just the people around me who are, some of them are, who are alcoholics, great friends to everyone, great friends to everyone, will do anything for anyone. Nurses, healers, and also this happens with women as well, the sort of women who feel sorry for a guy, take them into their home, he's a broken man, want to fix him, and that he becomes like a big child. They devote all their energies to him, but their own children suffer, So basically the message with the mother bear as well, is bloody look after your children. Just look after them. Look after your own children. Stop trying to look after everybody else's, because in the end, what will happen is your own family is destroyed. It's destroyed. And then that's the fragmentation of civilization. Well, at least Western European civilization, fast evaporating if we don't do something about it. So I've said this before. Look after your own, look after your families, be the best mother bear that you can. And if everyone looked after their own, we wouldn't be in this mess. Because what happens is if you bring up a dysfunctional family, then obviously the sins of the father, the sins of the mother get passed on to the children, and we'll just stay in this rut until it just completely implodes and there is no more. So maybe it has to go that far. Maybe it has to go that far because out of the decay, there's always new life. There's always new life, and that's what gives me hope, because I'm a cyclical person, and if we remember that, we won't get too depressed. So I want to end it on a good note and say that not all women who stand by their men are codependent. And a lot of advice from AA, I've actually never been to one of these things, so I don't know. If I've got it wrong, I might, maybe someone who has gone to Al-Anon will tell me really if I'm wrong here. But it seems to me that sometimes it is the fact that you stand by somebody, but you have to give them tough love. You can't be enabling them. I think that's the difference, is that some people will stay in a bad relationship and just keep enabling it because they are afraid of not having anyone at all. So that doesn't work. But if you set the boundaries with these people, if you've got strong boundaries, you'll know how to do that. So you'll be able to. And then hopefully, they will come round, because their environment is containing the water, containing the Neptune in its Saturn chalice, really. So then then you have hope. So this temptation, it's about being able to have that temptation sitting in front of you and you just going no, because there's a better option there. The environment around is so nice and I feel so loved that I don't need that, really. And running away from it isn't really setting a boundary at all, because you're not learning to set boundaries by running away, because all you're doing is removing that test, that challenge, which is, the more times you face a challenge and say no to it, the more you're wiring your brain to say no. Running away from it, I don't think is going to help build a strong immune system, which is basically what it is at the end of the day. It's like I've said this before as well, it's like it's like the person who's scared of getting ill and they disinfect everything, scared of any germs at all. So you're not allowing your body to have a little fight with some kind of virus, because it's a fight with the virus that builds up the strength and the immune system. So it is a question of balance, always the same conclusion, really. And so at this eclipse, we have the learning triangle, which is a really good balance of all the things you need to do to learn your lesson and become strong. It's actually looking at the chart again. I mean, there's 2 learning triangles in there as well. It's not just the eclipse one. It's also Uranus trine Saturn square Venus. There we go, relationships, and then back up to Uranus again. So it is all about setting boundaries in relationships. And no doubt, the Mars retrograde, it's there as well. Interestingly, it's quite close to Lilith as well. I didn't see that until just now. So yeah, there's the forbidden fruit as well. So we will be tested, but I think victory is pretty well starred as well. All right then, that brings me to the end. All the best, and do come to Darkstar Astrology for more details on Mars retrograde, because I've done a little post on that, what it means, and the 2019 horoscopes and the monthly horoscopes as well, and what Mars retrograde means for your sign. All the best. Bye-bye.